Thank you for tuning into From the Cowboy State podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Getz. This is season 2, episode 3, and we have got Alison Crane with us today. I'm going to turn it over to her, let her introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. And yes, my name is Alison Crane. Some might know me as Alison Borcher. Recently married Weston Borcher, I guess about a year ago, here in Powell, Wyoming, and became the executive director of Wyoming Wool Growers in July of 2022. So approaching the 3-year mark now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on. And that's actually what we're going to dive into a little bit today is Wyoming Wool Growers, the sheep industry, maybe some hurdles facing the sheep industry right now. But so let's just talk about your history of, coming to Powell, Wyoming, Wyoming Wool Growers, and just all of that background.
Yeah. So, there's a lot. It's a winding road to get to Wyoming. I wanted to live here since I was a very small child. I think I was about 7 the first time I came to Wyoming on a family vacation, and cried when we left the state.
Oh my gosh.
I told my parents one day I would live in Wyoming, and here I am. I
love that.
It took me a while to get here, like I said, but yeah, I finally made it, and little did I know I would marry a Wyoming guy and never look back. Did not know it would be sheep that brought me here and kind of along the journey. I would have never thought, if you had asked me as a kid, that I would be working with sheep. I never saw sheep until I was probably 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So grew up with horses and cattle, and my dad's a horse shoer, trains horses.
Yeah.
I was a horse girl from Alabama and loved cattle. I thought I wanted to work with cattle ranchers. First through large animal medicine, and then when I was an undergrad, I worked for a large animal vet all through high school and college, like the typical girl who wants to be a large animal vet. Went to a great undergrad. It was Berry College in Georgia.
Oh, great.
Loved the program, and because of the experiences I had there and working with it, I was very clear-headed when I made the decision to not become a large animal vet. And I was actually in the midst of applying to vet school when I made that decision.
Wow.
But I'd taken part in their undergrad research program and was doing some cattle research mostly, did a horse project, and then was working on a sheep project actually at the time. And I remember telling my vet if I had to do another C-section on a cow, I was going to lose it. I just could not do another one. And I said, it was so frustrating because I just felt like a large amount of those could have been prevented.
Sure.
They were a preventable thing. And I would much rather be on the educational side of that.
Okay.
Producers, and try and figure out what, some of the reasons why we're having to do C-sections.
Right.
Are not preventable. But what's the best educational tool? What's the research behind the situation? And I was in the middle of doing research, so it's really pertinent in my mind of like, let's try and figure this out.
Yeah.
And I just loved working with the ranchers. And but no one really tells you that extension is a thing, and unless it's 4-H,
you don't know.
Really have contact with extension. And
right.
At the county I grew up in, we didn't have like an ag or 4-H extension program. And so I just didn't know that it was a thing. Other than my grandmother talking about, the old facts, like
right.
they would around and teach how to sew and cook and stuff like that.
Or canning.
Yeah. And so other than that part of extension, I never had any contact with it at all.
Yeah.
And so when I found out about extension, it was actually through a professor I had in undergrad, and he was kind of the sheep guy, and he had done his grad work at South Dakota State, and he said, there's some really good programs out there, and that can kind of train you in extension as you're going through grad school. You just have to decide if you want to do horses, sheep, or cattle.
What?
And at that point, most of my work had been done with cattle, and it's like, I think I want to do cattle stuff.
Yeah.
About that time, I started managing the sheep barn there in college. And only because they gave me a raise, because I was like everyone else in the world with cattle that just thinks sheep are dumb. It's just a pain to work with. And it's like, I don't want to be a sheep person.
Yeah.
But then I started doing my research project. fell in love with sheep, and I could just hear my vet in the back of my head, he's a big guy, he's like 6'5", like I think he played football through high school, and he said, he's like, you have to, I'm not telling you can't do it, but for reference, then I was 5'4" and about 100 pounds.
Sure.
I was a tiny human. He's like, you have to know like what you can do and how long you can do it.
Okay.
If you're going to work with very large animals, be prepared for that to really tear up your body.
Sure.
He's a large guy.
Yeah.
He had 2 torn rotator cuffs.
Yeah.
And torn up a knee and, all those things. And it's just stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so I could hear him in the back of my head. Probably the smartest thing to do is to work with sheep. And then I fell in love with them, so it's just a really convenient thing at that point. I think I might rather do this than other things. And so, and then I went to North Dakota State for graduate school, did my master's and PhD there at a research station in Hettinger, North Dakota, so the southwestern part of the state.
Yeah.
You would be mad at me if I didn't say this. So, the largest state-owned sheep research station in the country. So,
great.
Really great sheep program, very practical, kind of range, commercial-based sheep flock. Awesome program. And so I was there just shy of 6 years, I guess, doing my grad work. And then first job out of the gates was sheep extension specialist for K-State.
Mm-hmm.
Was there probably another 5 years. That seems to be my model. Stay somewhere 4 or 5 years to move. Was there. Figured out not a teacher.
Okay.
Not a teacher.
Okay.
Not my passion.
Yeah.
My passion lies. I love adult education and extension. That was just truly where my passion was, and dabbling in research. But not a teacher. Sure, ads love them. We need them, but
it's a complicated age. Absolutely.
Yeah. So then, then the wool growers job came open, and I was not going to apply for it.
Okay.
And I thought I was probably the most underqualified person to do the job like this. It's a lot of policy stuff.
It is.
It's not my background. Mm-hmm. I did some law classes, water law and ag law and stuff in my grad school work, just because I wanted to kind of understand it. But it was really enough to know how much I don't get it.
Sure.
And now I am so happy I took those courses. And because it's amazing how much you talk about NEPA in this job.
Right.
And so many people just don't even know that that's a part of almost every decision that gets made for any kind of public land grazers. And then so many other decisions too. So really happy I had that background coming into the job. But wow, I've been so much more prepared on the politics side of it all.
Sure.
But really happy that I had the background I did, and no one that can ever question my passion of the sheep industry. But so then I've been here for almost 3 years, like I said, and hopefully, and I think we're kind of all on the same page for wool growers. Like we've really kind of delved into a lot of different parts of wool growers, of expanding certain things that we've traditionally done, so like the sales and things like that, but also trying to do more education things and working with WIT, and of course now the Sheep Task Force, and partnering on things so that we can touch more people.
Sure.
And like the festival, and making sure that we're taking time to not. I think we can all really dwell on the things that are affecting the industry in a negative way. But everyone always talked about the sheep herder parties that used to happen in the 80s and 90s too. And all of us are like, man, especially I shouldn't say kids, but I love myself into it too. But the kids like our age, it's like we never got to experience this.
Right.
And the social aspect and the optimism. And so to bring something like that back, that we can celebrate the industry, celebrate the history, the culture. And that's kind of where that festival came from. Mm-hmm. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We still don't 3 years in, but it's a party, and that's kind of
it is a party. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's like let's add a little bit of serious stuff, but no negativity. We don't want any negativity. And so that's been a really fun, positive thing for wool growers, and to bring UW into it, and now a lot of other entities too, as far as Forest Service and BLN,
right,
and working with our animal damage management boards and predator boards, and it's just. Yeah, I would say if anybody ever feels left out, you just gotta
let us know.
Yeah, because we'd love to have anybody and everybody be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about the Wyoming Sheep and Wool Festival a little bit. Yeah. For those who don't know, it's a huge educational event, but it's also meant to, correct me if I'm wrong, bring awareness.
Yeah.
To just the industry as a whole. Yeah. You said this year will be, or last year was the third annual?
This year will be the third one.
And it's in Buffalo, Wyoming.
Buffalo at the Johnson County Fairgrounds.
And what are the official dates?
July 11th through the 13th.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And so I was like, I couldn't have rattled that one off. But and what else is going on at those? So there's food, there's
lots of food, and we try and always do it kind of course it's lamb centric around the food, but this one, because Buffalo is so Basque centered, focused as a community, we're going to try and have really great Basque food represented.
Yeah.
And then, so Friday night, we always do kind of an opening reception for the art show, because that's another huge part of it. Mm-hmm. So we really wanted to bring in the artistic side.
And that method is called felting? Or what is...
So felting, you can bring in felt work, needlework. We have some weavers that came in last year. There's a beautiful felted hat.
Yeah.
As a part of it. But then we do photography. We have an amazing painter that just wish I could buy.
Yeah, right.
Does. And a lot of her stuff is focused in the southwestern part of the state, like her scenes and everything. We have just really any facet of art that somebody wants to bring, as long as it's kind of celebrating the Western lifestyle and hopefully the sheep industry, but anything kind of Western oriented, we want to bring into that art show. And then there's prize money for it. We keep trying to kind of raise the stakes.
Sure.
They can, if anyone's interested in entering it or being a vendor, because we do a big vendor fair as a part of it as well. The website's really easy. It's just WyomingSheepandWoolFestival.com, and you just go to the tabs of whatever you want to do or be a part of. And most of the information is up on the website at this point. I think we're just waiting on the art show to be uploaded. But other than that, everything's current, I think, for the most part. And as vendors come in, submit things, we'll get all that stuff posted, so that people can see who will be there.
Great.
Oh, and the concert. We did a concert too on Saturday night as a part of that dinner. So that dinner on Saturday night is the only thing that we charge for. Mm-hmm. And we usually do $20-25 a ticket. And then the concert afterwards is free. So we open it all back up. So we just need to cover the one meal. Mm-hmm. And we do the University of Wyoming Lamb a Year Awards. As a part of that, we do our Wool Growers Awards as a part of that as well. And this year, we're going to have Tris Munsick and Innocence playing, which I'm really excited about. It's one of the first Wyoming artists I ever saw when I was in grad school. So they're great. Of course, the Munsicks are just super talented people. But.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, super excited for that. That was actually one of the first, I think, Wool Growers events maybe that I actually went to. I know. Well, because I started a year ago.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Micah Most, he said, hey, Sheep Task Force. And then, we got, And then I think a group of us kind of got, brought up and then into, or, volunteered into the festival and everything like that. And so that was one of the first places for sure that I had lamb, and then one of the first events that I went to.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
It was very neat. It was super fun.
Vermont was really an interesting location for it too, and the food community was a really big part of it.
It was.
that was fun.
It was toasty that day or that weekend for sure.
Yeah. we were a little bit concerned about turnout, but actually we grew from the previous year. So hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah.
In Buffalo. Hopefully we have a much more pleasant temperature-wise day for it.
Yeah. And my folks who are listening who are saying it doesn't get hot in Wyoming, I think we hit triple digits that weekend. It was rivaling Texas temperatures. So
very hot. Very hot.
It was.
Yeah, even for the Alabama girls.
Yes. Gosh, that humidity. But so let's jump backwards a little bit to wool growers.
Yeah.
What does the organization as a whole kind of try to contribute to, do on a, maybe not day to day, because you guys aren't meeting every single day, of course, but when you guys do meet, what's the goal of the organization for those who aren't aware?
Yeah, so our motto is to promote, protect, and preserve the Wyoming sheep industry. And so, and with that, I will use this little plug. This is not, even though our name is Wyoming Wool Growers, we embrace our hair sheep producers, people, I should say hair sheep people, that sounds strange, but our hair sheep producers, as they are a growing part of the Wyoming industry. And like I always tell them when they ask me if they're allowed,
absolutely,
allowed to join wool growers, I say absolutely. Coyotes eat your sheep too.
Yeah,
coyotes don't.
They don't discriminate.
I don't either. And I mean, as a person who went to undergrad in Georgia, and I'm from Alabama, and I mean that is the industry down there. You see very few wool sheep, so that's my first interaction with sheep was hair sheep. So I'm not prejudiced at all, and you can make a thriving business out of it. I am game, and I will support you. So it's, I just wanted to make that little plug. The hair sheep guys are welcome too. We just work to any promotion that we can. It's just the things like the Wool Festival and the Ram Sale and the ewe sale that's coming up, and doing anything that we can to promote our industry in the state. So we're working on currently right now we try to continually update the website, but I'm not human. Sometimes the website kind of gets punted to the side when things get cheap. But we try and put up some really good resources, whether that's through UW or other universities that are doing sheep work, but also having resources for consumers. So Wyoming Business Alliance does a really good job kind of looping in sources where you can purchase lamb, consumer lamb. But we're going to try and not only embrace what they're doing, but make our own kind of web page for Wyoming lamb producers. So whether they're USDA certified lamb or state inspected lamb, because we have a lot of Wyoming restaurants that are really interested in serving lamb.
Yeah.
You have to go through a few more hoops for that to happen.
Sure.
But being able to link them with local producers so that we can do a better job promoting Wyoming lamb on behalf of our producers.
Right.
It can't all fall on them either. So doing things like that, just trying to expand how we can promote, especially as we face all these issues that come into the industry, which brings me to the preserving and protecting part. So we work really closely with the animal damage management boards on the predator control side of things. And of course, now I just took over as the director for the Wyoming Association of County Predatory Animal Boards.
Oh, wow.
It's the longest acronym ever. But, and so that's kind of classically always been housed under wool growers or alongside wool growers, I should say. So having the same director, because you're getting a lot of that contact from producers, under boards. And then since we're kind of lobbying behind a lot of that, now we actually have, because wool growers has taken on so much, we have a hired lobbyist for wool growers and a hired lobbyist for the Wyoming Association.
That's great.
Boards. So now we have really three bodies, physical bodies in Cheyenne, although I'm not there most of the time, but I'm kind of on call to be down there or to testify if I need to. We have those two lobbyists on behalf of each of those organizations. So more representation for the sheep industry than we've classically had in Cheyenne for a long time. And because it's really hard on one person to do all of that. I know this year there are so many bills that were pertinent to both the sheep side, wool grower side, and the predator report side, that sometimes you needed to be in 3 rooms at the same time.
Right.
It's just impossible without that many bodies. So the lobbying is a huge part. Predator control side is a huge part. Wool Growers has an airplane, which was something that's very new. I don't know if there's any training in take over managing an airplane. And so that's it's one of the more fun parts of getting to recontract with wildlife services on that airplane. So it's based out of Fremont County.
Oh, great.
And and so they do a lot of flying. It's outfitted with telemetry. So
great.
Also helping with bear management, wolf management. And so you really get to make a lot of bridges, build a lot of bridges. Because, for predator control, we're not just annihilating wolves or annihilating bears like a lot of people think. And there's a lot of monitoring that goes on. And it's also helping preserve wildlife populations, which is something that we've been trying to tell that story, that side of the story a lot more. Our wool growers, our private landowners are really doing a large part of the management of our wildlife that is so integral to the state of Wyoming. And that's what people think of when they think of Wyoming, is the wildlife.
Absolutely.
And then second, usually is ranching. And so you think big, large expanses of land and huge wild populations, whether that's of ungulates or large predators, and you can't have that without the private landowners.
Right.
So being able to preserve their lifestyle also preserves wildlife, and which I think has been a really fun thing to see in the last few years, and comes into the preservation part of Wool Growers, of being able to mend some fences with some of the wildlife organizations that classically we've kind of been pitted against each other, which it just happens. But being able to say, what are the things that we can work on together? Because there's a lot of things that we all have a huge disdain for, invasive grass species. Those no one favors, and so it's like, okay, what can we do lobbying for the dollars to go into the budget and to manage invasive grass species, like cheatgrass.
Oh gosh,
a huge problem in Park County.
Yes,
but being able to do things like that. That we can just focus on the good that we can all do, because we all do kind of carry the big stick, and it's going to benefit wildlife. It'll benefit private landowners. It benefits our public lands as far as grazing and wildlife that does utilize those private or public lands. And then it helps us. It humanizes everyone,
right?
And which is kind of the issue with everything right now in this country, is being able to see the human behind the disagreement. And so that's just been a huge thing these last 3 years for us. I might really disagree on this, but
here's our common goal.
Yeah. And so that's been a wonderful thing to work on. And the bighorn sheep is what everyone thinks of, and nobody wants to talk about it or bring it up. And we all tread pretty lightly, but and that's been a long journey. Right now it's the Sweetwater Rocks issue, and where they're trying to introduce bighorns into Sweetwater Rocks area, and we have a lot of private landowners in that area that don't want it. But it's because of a long history of private landowners kind of getting shafted, in the midst of trying to bring in a population of bighorns, and we've really slowed down this process, whether it's Sweetwater Rocks or anywhere else, of how do we, and it's because of this working group, statewide working group that we have, where everyone gets a seat at the table and we can discuss the problems, the issues, and then the solutions. And so that's from this one, we've kind of come up with, we need federal protection, not for bighorns, but for our private landowners. Because that's their underlying fear. None of us hate bighorn sheep.
No one is saying that.
Personally, I'd love to draw tag. I love hunting. I'm a big hunter. Yeah. I would love to have a tag. And here the meat's fantastic. And they're really cool animals. But
they are.
So we all want to see them out there. We
Sure.
want to see successful populations, but not at the detriment of livestock.
Right. Not of the overrun.
Yeah, whether it's sheep or cattle or whatever it might be, goats. And just making sure that that's not at the detriment of those industries that are such a huge part of Wyoming too. And I think if we're in a really good place, I mean, does get a little warm in the room sometimes, you might say. But I think we're in a better place than we've been in maybe ever. Working through those issues, and sometimes it is just having the wherewithal, I guess, to say, well, we're probably not going to come to a solution today. And
let's just table it.
Yeah, and like come back to it and talk about it. And right now we're pushing for some federal legislation for protection for our private landowners, the grazers out there, whether that's on public land or making sure that they're on private rights. So not coming into question, but mostly on the public lands in that area. So I'd say that's one of the biggest issues for Wyoming right now as far as wool growers goes.
Yeah. So let's keep talking about the hurdles then.
Yeah.
That you see not only from like the wool grower side, but in the sheep industry right now. I know a big thing that I guess kind of started last year and has continued into this year was the H-2A workers initiative bill, what have you.
Yeah.
And then you've talked about the protection for landowners, but what other things are you guys seeing?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I've been working on through wool growers, but it's very much so at a national level, is the H-2A side of things, the H-2A program. Most of our large range producers in the state and then across the West utilize that H-2A workers program. And historically, it's always kind of been lumped in as an immigration issue. So you typically don't get any traction when there's a more liberal administration in place federally, because nobody wants to touch a visa program.
Right.
And it's highly bureaucratic, which is something I've learned in the last 6 months, more bureaucratic than I ever thought possible. And then when you get a more conservative administration in place, then all of a sudden it's also labeled as an immigration issue, and they don't want to touch it because all of a sudden if you do something to make the program more workable, they see it as you're bringing in an immigrant population. Even though it's a visa program, it's a temporary worker program. And that really is not competitive for the American worker.
Right.
I know very few people, and I'm one of them, that would be willing to work in that program. And part of it is, I have a PhD in sheep, but I still get told I'm unqualified to do those jobs.
Right.
And and there's some truth to it. That's a special skill set.
It is.
But we're seeing through some wildlife services programs and NRCS, there's some recognition of this is not just an immigration thing. These guys are skilled workers that no matter where they're from, we're starting to get recognition through NRCS that these range riders, whether it's sheep or cattle, are actually a wildlife interaction in a negative way preventer. They prevent these negative situations. And yes, you still get some interaction, but they're preventing a bad situation happening.
Right.
You might have to take a bear or a wolf because they can mitigate that situation. And so we're getting more and more recognition in that way, which is huge.
Right.
And that's something that I've been trying to tell people is, this should be looked at as a temporary worker program. It's not an immigration issue. This is completely 100% legal in every way.
Yeah.
And, but we do need to streamline it. And it's becoming so costly for the average livestock producer that they can't sustain their business model.
Right.
And then there's not enough American workers to fill in that void. And then it would probably be even more of an issue that we won't get into. But it could just blow up the issue if all of a sudden you had American workers coming into those, but there's just not enough of them.
Yeah.
So really the biggest thing is cutting down cost, because it's based off of some formulas that just don't make any sense. And so we keep getting exponential increases in the wages for the workers. Everybody wants to pay their workers. Most of them are a part of the family because they keep coming back year after year into these operations. And so everybody wants to pay fair wages, but do you get an increase in your salary every year? I know. Yeah, as a state employee, I used to be a state employee.
Yeah,
I got one bonus one year, and actually got 2 cuts.
Yeah.
So it's not practical from any kind of worker standpoint to do these continual increases in wages, and just basing the formula off of something more practical, or the wage rates off of a more practical formula, I should say. So that it is a workable program. And, I mentioned the bureaucracy. I think we counted 17 different agencies that are part of a single visa being granted.
Sure.
So these guys are having to do multiple applications in the process to multiple agencies, same application, but to
all of these different.
And every time they file that application, there's a fee. So just in fees, they have thousands of dollars, and it's a season. These are an annual work permit. And if they lose your permit, or like this year we had a change, like a rule change, regulation change in the middle of a permit season. And so then people had to go and refile because for Wyoming, our form changed and it was a mess, and so you had to refile, and that was a fee. They didn't reimburse your fee for the first time around, and so it's just a mess. It's a bureaucratic mess, and we're hoping like the Doge program will get a hold of and be like, this is right up your alley. Can we just streamline this a little? And so, those 2 things within H2A have just been huge. And we're trying to work on it. I know it's going to be a big pitch when we go to DC in March, just trying to get some kind of a workaround in that program to help our producers. So, I'm trying to think of you mentioned another one.
No, I think I just asked about those 2 or any others maybe.
Yeah.
But while you're thinking of those, and forgive me because this is not a fully formed thought yet, but you had mentioned, the inability to necessarily fill those roles, and, right, wrong, or the other, the ability to fill those roles with American workers. And I guess my brain kind of went, so do you think there's a correlation between the inability to fill those roles with American workers and the lack of succession planning that's going on right now, because there's a huge age gap, right, between our current age of producers and then younger kids who are coming up?
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. I don't know if there'd be a direct correlation.
Sure.
But I think
it just seems like a big issue right now. All of these farms and ranches, what have you, unfortunately get sold off and subdivided out.
Yeah.
And
it is no doubt. Succession planning is
it's a whole other mess we could spend a lot of time on.
It's like a personal thing.
Yeah.
And we cannot talk about it enough.
Right.
And because it's to the detriment of not just the sheep industry. I mean, all of agriculture, farming.
Right.
Farming and ranching both. And it is, we kind of got messed up, in my view. We got messed up 2 generations ago.
Sure.
And it used to be so simple. I think that's where we got off track.
Right.
Just always got to pass down to the oldest boy.
Right.
That's just the way it went.
Yep. Or even if not the oldest boy, then the next one.
Then the next one.
Sure.
Yeah. And now everything is much more complicated as we get, and I feel terrible saying this, but as our average age of living continues to increase, and that happened 2 generations ago. And so you have people staying on longer and longer in the operation, and then it didn't get turned over to this now older generation so much later, so they don't feel like they've had their time to make their mark.
Right.
And so then it gets pushed off even more.
It's like this impatience almost.
Yeah. And so then you have people that are, our age.
Sure.
You're like, okay, how long do I have to wait?
Right.
Until I get to take this over. But then, coming back to the labor side of things, you have also, I mean, we have producers for Wyoming Wool Growers that are, members that, like, my parents have done the H2A permitting.
Right.
My entire life. I don't even know where it is in a file.
Sure.
And like where to start. And that's where Wool Growers, I think, has a huge, huge void to fill of, that's not going to be an extension expertise that
right.
nor should it fall onto someone for extension person to try and educate them. Like, here's all of your checkboxes for H2A. That would be a nightmare. I don't recommend anyone in extension tries to put that on it. Plus the bureaucracy of it.
Sure.
But, but we could bring in experts from Western Range Association or Mountain Plains to say, this is what we do for a living. Let me walk you through, because there's so many people that are wanting to come into the sheep industry, but they do need the labor force.
Right.
And they don't know where to start either. So it's like, let's level the playing field and do the same thing with Forest Service permits and BLM permits. And because we have so many people who just had to figure it out and mess up along the way. And I think we could just kind of streamline that process by bringing in some experts and saying, here's the tools
here you go
to be successful. And because it is, with succession being such a major problem, and it has forced some young people out of the industry, because whether it's through frustration or getting caught up in probate, and then you can't make a living anymore because it's been not in operation for so many years.
Right.
So you've lost too much money. So whatever scenario that it's coming out of, but we need to support the guys that are trying to come in and build up, and which we have. This is our USDA doesn't capture the numbers extremely well, but we have a lot of young producers.
Right.
And young for me is if you're under like 45. But we have a lot of young people coming in to the sheep industry because the startup is less compared to other sectors of agriculture, especially cattle right now.
Oh gosh. Yeah, right.
Right now, I'm not one to be trying to get into the cattle industry. But right now, it's pretty cheap to start to sheep. That's hard to say. So yeah, you can buy in and not have to buy in a lot of equipment. And yeah, we're seeing some success because of that. So hopefully it turns around here in a little bit and people can make their money. But yeah. It's all, there's so many little things that could be changed or just better supported. But I think we're all trying. It's a small industry.
It is. But, okay, fair enough. What else?
Let's see.
Across the board.
Well, we can talk about weather.
Oh gosh.
Something
the current blanket of snow in Park County.
Very white, very windy.
Yes.
And we're currently lambing right now. So,
gosh.
That's been a kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about your dreams and your goals. And we're figuring out we need to set some new goals, which weather does to you.
Yep.
And yeah, it's kind of a mess. It's kind of a mess right now for lambing. So yeah, I would say it's shed some new light for us in our personal operation. And I really feel for those guys in the Southwest 2 years ago.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Just the sheer amount of snow that they got.
I feel like we flip-flopped this year from what I've heard.
Yeah.
It's just been the total opposite.
It's kind of inverted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it does. It's like we can't break out of the cold. And it's just, sheep are tough. I just have my sister up here that has never been around sheep and never been around weather.
Oh gosh.
And
is she from Alabama?
Yeah. So she said, what a beautiful place, how harsh.
That's such an accurate way.
She said, I've never seen an animal so tough.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the sheep and everything. And that's, if everyone could see sheep in these scenarios and like small lambs,
true,
and the things that they can make it through, it's pretty incredible how tough and resilient they are.
They
animals
truly are, yes.
And we're trying to make them as much as we can, but man, It's rough. It's rough out there.
With this weather, it makes me think. So Dr. Whit Stewart on campus at UW, he had sent me out. So we had that Innovations in the Lambing Barn webinar coming up on a year ago now. I think it was, honestly, probably about a year ago. It was one of the first things I did with the Sheep Task Force.
Yeah.
And sent me out to Regan Smith's place, and the piping, I don't even,
ventilation.
yes, all of that he's done, and it sucks the moisture off of the bottom in the lambing barn, and it is the neatest thing. And I'm like, wow, what a handy contraption to have in this weather.
Yeah, and that's I've always said to people too. It's your lambing barn is if you're going to lamb through a barn, which if you're going to lamb in January and February and March and even April, in Wyoming, you are probably going to go through a shed of some sort.
Yeah,
but ventilation is key, and especially like right now, you're in this weird temperature thing that it's like a microcosm of temperature, and you can't kick lambs out,
right?
Because they've been inside, and then some of them are just not old enough to be shocked into these outside temperatures, and you have to not only have proper ventilation, so you are getting moisture off the ground, but it's ammonia. Yeah. And I always sort of say ammonia causes pneumonia. So having a ventilation system like that can't, because if they're sitting in a barn for any amount of time, and of course, if you have especially a high producing flock, you're putting a lot of high quality feed through the sheep. And so they're making even more concentrated urine feces and everything. And so it just compounds the problem. And so, having that ventilation of pulling ammonia and moisture off the ground and just getting it out. Walk through their lambing barns and say, it smells fine. It's fine. I'm like, you're, 5-6 feet tall. It's probably fine at your level,
but not down there.
Crawl around. See if they start coughing. Then that'll tell you everything you need to know about what it's like down there where a lamb and you are breathing. And because you can get some chronic coughing in the ewes too. Sure. It's the weather makes some lovely issues. But it does point out your flaws of an operation, though, like your shortcomings, and where hopefully in the summer you can make some improvements. I know we did that last year. We put in a lot more automatic waters.
Oh, great!
Because, we got not only the labor of having to, because we're just family labor, so we don't have any hired help or anything, and so having to go fill tanks and stuff, and because we only had a few automatic waters just up close, and so we went in and just all of our overflow lots has been expanded the operation. We just, to the point you just have to put in some automatic waters. And it was a huge improvement, and new shed and things for some shelter and everything. But now it's lambing barn. That's going to be the next thing on the list, is brainstorming some improvements, so that when you do come into wrecks like this, and Park County is just so typically very temperate.
And really, well, especially over here in Powell too. You don't.
Yeah. But then something like this, you're not prepared. You're just not prepared for it. But it's all management stuff, and you just work through it as best you can and try and get through the panic moments. Pray for the best. In this little basin, you can warm up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The sun's trying to peek through, so we'll see.
Yeah, sunshine does a lot.
Alrighty. So any upcoming events, presentations, anything like that to be aware of?
Yeah, so we have the Wyoming Select Bred Ewe Sales. This is also our third one of those. So I bit off a lot my first year. And so we're coming into the third year for a lot of these events. But Wyoming Select Bred Ewe Sale in Gillette at the Camplex on February 22nd. So that's a Saturday. Mostly going to be bred ewes, of course, presented at that sale from a lot of amazing Wyoming sheep producers, and kind of all age ranges of the ewes. So anything from like bred yearlings to some aged ewes, broken mouthed ewes, It's a really good opportunity for some young and new producers to get into the industry for not a whole lot of cost and a lot less risk involved in that situation, which is why we wanted to put that sale on. And then shortly after that, February 28th, we're going to be hosting a lambing school down in the southeastern part of the state. So in Burns, Wyoming. You do have to pre-register for it. So in order to get the exact location, I do need you to pre-register just so we can cover some of our costs and kind of have food prepped because there's nothing much close to the location. So we kind of need to know how many people are coming. But that's going to be very oriented towards new, young, or new, older producers that just don't have a whole lot of lambing experience.
Sure.
And just very like nuts and bolts of like, here's how to get through your first lambing. So lots of tubing and different presentations of lambs, how to navigate pulling lambs, how to get them started once you have them pulled, and nursing up and grafting and all of the fun messes that you can run into during lambing. And that will be on a producer's place. And so, we'll hopefully lots of hands-on experience. You can never predict what they're going to do, but hopefully we'll get some good experiences for people out of that. I know we have a few pre-registered so far. That can be done on our Wyoming Wool Growers website. Okay. Which is just wyowool.com, WYOWOOL.com. It's hard to say too. And and then of course just the ram sale coming up and the festival. And then for the first time in I think it's 5 years, we're going to be hosting the West Central States Wool Growers convention.
That's right.
We call it Tri-State Convention. Proper name is West Central States. And so that's with Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, and Idaho. So it was in Boise the last 2 years. And so now it's coming back to Wyoming and it'll be in Cody. So close by for all the Park County folks. And we get a lot of vendors in for that event, lots of educational stuff, talk about policy stuff as well. What we can do for our large range producers is that convention represents a ton of them. So kind of bracing ourselves for what's to come at ASI, because then ASI is up in January. So it's a really good get together in November. So it's November 6th through the 8th in Cody this year. And then we can kind of gather all of our thoughts for those big guys and shuffle those issues on to ASI, have our ducks in a row. Exciting year.
Really great. All right. Well, we will, as always, share some of the resources that we mentioned in the show details. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, look at those. Don't hesitate to reach out. And we had Dr. Alison Crane. She's got her PhD. We didn't have doctor at the beginning, but Dr. Alison Crane with us today. This was season 2, episode 3. Thank you so much, Alison, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. As always, this was from the Cowboy State Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Getz, and this was a University of Wyoming Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources podcast.
As a reminder, this is the University of Wyoming Extension podcast. The university is committed to equal opportunity for all persons in all facets of the university's operations and is an equal opportunity / affirmative action employer. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this statement, please don't hesitate to reach out to mgetz@uwyo.edu. and we can get your questions answered. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the podcast as well, again, don't hesitate to reach out to that email address, mgetz@uwyo.edu. Again, this has been a University of Wyoming Extension Agriculture and Natural Resources podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Funding for this UW Extension program is provided by the John P. Elbogen Foundation, Communities, Agriculture, and Rural Living Project Funds.